Welcome, Steve, to the LearnIt Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Dwight. Very nice to be here.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone for listening in already. And we're going to start off, of course, by a couple of, personal questions, just the way I like to get in. We're not a regular podcast. I'm not going to ask you to give an intro. I'm going to go straight to your childhood, Steve. So take me back there, because I've always felt like our childhood experiences in some ways shape who we end up becoming, the way that we behave as children. So how would your parents, your teachers have described you as a child?
This is taking me back to way back when, right? So grew up in Brampton, and so by and large, and we were probably 5 years old. My parents are Jamaican, came to Canada when they were 20. They had an opportunity to be able to take their kids to Jamaica for my father's an accountant, worked for Carrier Air Conditioning, and they said, there's a 3-year stint. Would you like to go?
Yeah.
Parents jumped at it. Said, you know what? Would love my kids to see the country that I grew up in. So we were there for 3 years, and incredible experience in that way. And I came back to Canada. So the question itself is great, because I think my experience, the 3 years in Jamaica, schooling there, community, family, coming back to Canada, absolutely has impact who I am. So. How would parents describe me? I think sport driven as a family. We're sport driven, probably quiet in many regards. Older brother, younger sister.
Oh wow!
In the middle,
right in the middle.
And I'll tell you, so stereotypical middle child, peacemaker. Wanting to look out for older one, younger sister.
Yeah.
Right? Driven. I think is the other one. As part of Jamaican immigrants, we grew up in a terrible way. I watch myself as I parent. Have to be better. Have to work harder. Mm-hmm. And I think that mindset as a kid carried through as an adult. So not so much perfectionist as a kid, but I think really driven and have to be feel that I was better at everything than everyone else. So
yeah, and it's important to feel connected to your culture, because I spent 18 years growing up in Uganda, and for me, when I moved to Canada, things were very different. Yeah. The way that the schools operated, the way that we communicated in our the way we operated, the way that any school worked, it was so different, and it was important for me to be able to see those differences as well. And so it's nice to see that you have also moved, and you've got these different perspectives, and
absolutely.
You are where you are today because that has shaped you today.
Absolutely. Childhood experiences, schooling, family life, community, absolutely make you who you are. I agree 100%.
And Steve, tell us, how did you get into this world of education? And the reason I ask is, I find every story so interesting. Mm-hmm. Did you fall into it by mistake? Were you going to Teachers College knowing exactly this is what I wanted? Did you go to Teachers College? What was your path to education? Yeah,
education was not something as a child I said, I want to be a teacher. I loved school. Elementary school, secondary school, university, loved it. My path, my plan was to be able to be a university professor.
Okay.
And, so that was sort of the plan. But no, I was sort of always worked with kids. So summer camps, Toronto Parks and Rec. Sort of the day camps and sort of the recreation supervisor. So there's always that side coaching involved with that. So I think there's always been a natural connection to teaching, but wasn't something that I entered saying this is what I want to be able to do. Went to university, and at that point it was phys ed at the time, was a degree. And it had a strong teaching bent to it. And from university, it was, this is what I want to be able to do. And it caught, right? Yeah. And it's just the passion and interest has always been there in that way as a young adult, I would say.
Right. And as a teacher, you made your way through to the growth within the school and then beyond to the board as well. Yeah. Can you share a few lessons, one key lesson that you learned at each of those points in your life? So when you were maybe even trying to become a teacher, when you were a teacher, when you progressed to principal, and then when you're superintendent, can you share one lesson from each of those?
Absolutely. And I think there's a connectedness to all of those. I think, I think you have to want to teach.
Yeah.
You have to. It can't be something that you sort of say, you know what? there's nothing for me, and I'm going to
I think every teacher I met says they only do it because they love it. And even if you go into it, if you don't love it, you'll be out of it soon.
You will be out of it soon, and there will be no joy.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as parent, as student, as principal, as superintendent, you walk into a class, you know when there's joy. You know when this is part of them, right? So, you have to want to be able to do it. As a teacher, just the importance of interacting with, right? Being a part of that classroom environment is such a important part, right? To show the joy of learning, of being part of education. I think that's something that I would absolutely impart.
Yeah.
For our principals or those aspiring to the role of administrator, I think the one for me is know your families. Right, take the time to really know families, and I think for myself, probably the coolest part of the job that I have, I can be overseas. Was actually in Greece last few weeks ago, and actually met a family that I didn't teach, but I was principal of the school at the time.
Yeah?
And so those experiences, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden, Mr. Gardner, and you do a double take. The connections, right? And those are lifelong, right? There's I think a number of families that I've continued to connect with from whether I was teaching, whether I was principal. So I thought that part is important. And then as superintendent, the advice I would give is very similar. I sort of talked about the interconnectedness of all the roles in education. Get to know families as well. A different role, but in the end, they're so similar. It's everything is student centered. It's in the best interest of our kids and our kiddos. It's get to know families.
Yeah. Do you miss being close to the students?
Yeah. So here's a little bit of my guilt coming out there. It's a good question because I'm asked that just I think in terms of being by family, and I think every part of my career I was ready for something different. Okay. So do I miss the teaching and the instruction part of it? With students, I don't know if I necessarily miss it. In my role now, there's an instructional leadership aspect to it. There's a facilitation working with adults now, so I still get that side of it. But the bottom line is still all decisions that I make. They're grounded in what's best for kids, what's best for students. So that side always is just part of you. Yeah.
And for those that are listening, how do you know when you're ready? How do you know when you're ready and you start questioning, do I want to progress or do something different? Yeah,
I think part of it is what others see in you.
I see.
Right? So not always for as much as, I think, and I often reflect back on sort of conversations I've had with teachers aspiring to the role of vice principal or vice principals aspiring to the role of principal. That's sort of the world that I work in, sort of the coaching, mentoring aspect of things. And often it's someone, I may not feel ready, but others seeing the leadership
they see it in
you and say, you know what, have you thought about? And that's sort of, where that coaching, mentoring relationship.
And it's so important to have those people around you, right? Because even when I look back at my career, I say, you know what? A lot of the opportunities that I've got, a lot of the growth that I've seen has come from people seeing that in me or people identifying and giving me the opportunity to do something I haven't. And having those people around to be able to vouch for you, to be able to mentor you through that is so important. And I assume you're now doing it for the future generations.
Absolutely, right. It's sort of, I don't even know if it's sort of the giving back idea, because there's a natural...
It's a cycle of life.
That cycle of life. But I think there's also a shift in terms of, I've been in current school board now, I think we're 31 years.
Wow.
As it comes out of my mouth, it seems old man talking.
Well, you look very young, Steve.
I look very young. There, I'll hold on to that. But I think back to years ago, I don't think the networking, the mentorship was quite the same. I think we talk a lot about representation. We talk about being able to see someone that looks like me, someone that looks like you in front of the class as administrator, as superintendent. And I think that world of mentorship and supports by way of, even social identities, I think you see a shift there because that certainly wasn't there 20 years ago.
Yeah,
for me.
it absolutely wasn't. Yeah,
right. But it's I think it's a part and parcel of how we operate now, and it's a very good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to shift gears. For those that don't know, Steve has been very involved in the York region as well, and developing engagement, leadership within schools. And I'd love to know what your approach is. In the role that you operate, I see that the world today is becoming increasingly hard to create engagement in for the audience that we're dealing with. Kids today are changing what they're looking for. The pandemic changed and shift a lot of things, and I think I have heard a lot of teachers finding it challenging to bring back the same levels of engagement and community that they used to have before. So what's your perspective on how this looks, 3-4 years from now? Yeah,
the notion of engagement is all sort of contextualized a little derived in terms of the work that I do. So when I think in terms of, it's leadership development and engagement sort of is my portfolio, and the engagement aspect is sort of twofold. There's sort of a bit of a parallel process. One really being sort of the parent, so we have a parent involvement committee, sort of the regional side of what you might know as sort of the school council, but sort of for the whole region. So sort of having support and somewhat oversight for that function. And then the other side of it is around student voice, and more of the formal student voice, so as opposed to student councils within secondary schools. We have student senates now that represent an entire board, as an example, student trustees.
Right.
And I don't know if I think voice in that regard is probably more amplified than it was many years ago. I think families are more apt to share concerns, to share things that are going well, to be able to have a voice. I think as a board and as school boards, we're much better, getting much better at listening to what's being said and doing something with that. From the student voice and engagement side of things as well. Right. I think where the work continues to be is how do we shift from the traditional student voice. So for as much as we have student senates and they're the leaders within each school, but those are a smaller faction of leadership. What about all those other students that are we providing a venue for those voices? Absolutely. Right. I think that's the work. So your question around sort of as we move forward, either what I would like to see or where do I see it going? I think that's a shift that needs to happen, is that sort of how do we add to that collective voice from those voices that we haven't necessarily heard? And from the parents' perspective, I don't know how much you can share, but what's top of mind right now? Top of mind, what student well-being. Mental health and well-being. Still, we're. I was talking to someone the other day, and we were talking in terms of pandemic and sort of coming out of it. And I gave a year. Said that's 2021. I said no, that's 2022. To the point where can't even remember
like
that.
A blip.
It's a blip, but there's still, I think, sort of the reverberations of 100%. All things pandemic, right? So we think in terms of the impact on our kids, our staff. Around what the pandemic did. So I think that there's still what as superintendent working with field and family schools and families, I think mental health and well-being still is a priority in many ways.
Absolutely. And I think it's I try and be close to the students because I find that I connect with them very well, and I can understand some of their challenges. And sometimes, of course, there's a lot of nuances around. There's a lot of students who maybe are comfortable sharing challenges that they face in the school, so the parents don't even know what's going on in their life, or some face challenges but they keep it in their own lives. And I think it becomes harder for even at the board level to be able to identify where we can do work, because it's been a challenge. And I think it's not something that's going to disappear. It's something we work towards slowly and we make improvements on. I'm curious to know from that perspective, if we look at well-being and student support, is there an initiative coming up or an initiative that's worked well that the York region has done that other boards can maybe learn from?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that sort of across the province that came to be is that it's an expectation that all school boards have school mental health leads. So it's a leadership position that sort of with oversight of mental health and well-being. And, School Mental Health Ontario is another organization that sort of works hand in hand with many of our school boards by way of resources and supports in that way. I think of earlier I was talking about sort of around student voice and sort of that student leadership at the regional level, and we're in the midst of creating through our trustees the multi-year strategic plan, sort of that 4-year plan, that guidepost for how we do business, sort of moving forward. And one of the things that I had a chance to be part of with a focus group with a group of students was around what do they want? What do they want to see our board do? And it was interesting around sense of belonging, to feel a part of. It was around clubs.
Oh, yeah?
It was around, sports activities.
Yeah.
But things that fall sort of outside of the academic realm of school.
Yeah.
So sort of Darsh, connect that back to mental health and well-being and how there's that bit of that wrapper in school. It's not, yes, it's absolutely student achievement. Student achievement and well-being is how we'll phrase it as well. So how do we ensure the well-being of students to ensure that the student achievement does occur.
Yeah, and that notion of going beyond academics is one that's very close to me, and that's even why LearnIt began in the first place, was to help kids learn about public speaking, financial literacy skills that I didn't get to learn when I was in school, and I hope that every kid now learns it because it's such a big part of life. And so it's nice to see that there's a focus on even going beyond academics. What are all the other facets of a student's life that we can touch on to help improve that experience as well.
Yeah, agreed.
And right now, I'm curious to know from your perspective and what you've seen. York region is one of the biggest regions on the school board perspective. When you think about the challenges that face us today, what do you think are one or two of the biggest challenges that face our education system today in Canada?
Big question.
Big question.
Big question. But, I think it touched on a couple. I think, mental health well-being of our students and staff absolutely is one.
A big one.
Still. I think, staff shortages, to be honest, is one that continues to be able to work through where, whether that's educational assistant shortages, whether that's occasional teacher shortages within schools. And I think that varies across different boards as well. I think sort of the rural boards look different than the larger urban boards, but that's absolutely issue. And the other part, which probably doesn't need to be said, is funding. Right? Will always be, right? You work with what you have. By way of efficiencies and sort of a lot of cross-departmental, interdepartmental work that takes place and partnerships. Right. That's collaborative partnerships that take place. But I think that those sort of are the big three in my mind. And I think you ask many in education. I think you probably get very similar. Well,
response. I've heard the student the resource shortage is one before. It's definitely one that I think has been top of mind for a long time. I don't think it's something that's it's been existing, and that's why I think there's a lot of teachers today who know how great it is to do what they do, but maybe there's a lot of folks that aren't pursuing teaching as a career as much as they used to in the past, and there may be financial, non-financial reasons for that, but there's definitely, I think, I don't know if it's changes to all the way to the college, like teachers' college that need to be made, or is it the teachers' experience after they graduate teachers' college? It's something I am very curious about. So it's definitely one that I've heard consistently for different boards as well. Yeah,
and I think part of it is, sort of supports that are, so there's the notion of sort of, recruitment, but the retention aspect of any sector. But if you in terms of education, it becomes, as a school board, what are we doing to support the retention of our teachers? I don't know what the numbers are, the stats are, but it's sort of across the province. It's sort of after you get through X number of years of teaching, sort of the retention rate is large, and you sort of have to get through that blip. So that first 2-3 years as school boards, what structures are we putting in place to support,
to retain,
absolutely, in the name of retain. I'd say by way of administrators, very similar as well. Part of my work is supporting newly appointed vice principals and principals in what we refer to as an induction program, sort of a 2-year learning training program, if you will. Because you think in terms of a lot of our administrators, we're, as I said, we're teachers. Right? I'm superintendent, but I'm teacher. Right? And sort of some of the managerial aspects. You talk about financial literacy. So budget and things similar to that. The training for that. If you're in finance and you become a teacher, you have that. But others don't. So there needs to be that training that takes place for the managerial aspect, certainly of administration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And right now, the way I like to see it is, okay, you started in a classroom and then you went to a school, and now you're overseeing multiple schools. I want to learn a bit more from your personal leadership style. So if you took everything away and you said, okay, how are you as a leader when it comes to whether it's leading the parents, whether it's being a good listener, how would you describe your leadership style, and what have you learned about leading large groups of people?
Yeah, I think in terms of leadership, I think it's leading with humility. I think is one that's I'd like to think that's how I lead. I'd like to think of others, if you were to ask, would say that. So I think leading with humility. I think there needs to be an authenticity of when you do something. I think the notion of transparency. There in our roles, there's many decisions that are made that folks aren't necessarily going to be happy with because they're approaching you with wanting a particular change. So I think there's being able to explain why a decision is made, and at the very least, there's an understanding in terms of sort of how you've come up.
The rationale,
absolutely,
why you're doing what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, not everyone's going to be happy. You can't make everyone happy. No. There might be 1 or 2 people who are disappointed. So how do you communicate the reason? Yeah,
I think the communication is critical as well. And I think the other part, by way of leadership style, I think it's easy. No is an easy answer.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But it's also around perspective taking, right? So as parent, you're coming to me, you're meeting with me for a reason. Taking away your time, you work, but you blocked off time because it's important enough, your issue, to be able to meet with me, to be able to sort of work through that issue. So the easy response is no, because we've never done that. We don't do it this way. The work, and I think for me, this is what leadership is around perspective taking, because if it's an issue for you, there's an issue.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I may not understand by my perspective, but I need to be able to hear from you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about it.
To put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, you know what, let me try and understand. I may not agree with you, but I need to understand.
But there's a reason that you feel like you do. You're not making it up. There's a reason. Yeah. So being able to hear that, to be able to work that through and recognize that yes, we may have always done it that way.
Yeah.
And we're governed
by... But is it the right way?
And is it the right way? Yeah. We're governed by legislation. We're governed by Ed Act. We're governed by policy.
Yeah.
And those are pieces that there's not really gray in that. But there's other pieces absolutely by way of practice that there's gray areas that we can sort of stretch and work through if it's the best decision for that student, for that family, right? So,
exactly. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Yeah. All right, we're going to shift gears into my favorite part of this, which is a new thing that we're trying. Okay. So you're going to be our guinea pig, Steve. But it's a rapid fire round. So we're going to go through quick questions. We're going to go through quick answers under a minute. Okay. These are going to be a mix of personal perspectives, professional. Nice. So starting off, what's your favorite book or podcast that you'd recommend everyone to read?
I'll go book, because it's probably top of mind. Okay. And tell me if you've heard of it, or if you haven't, you need to look at it. So the book's Street Data. Street Data is a book that by Saffer and Dugan, Jamila Dugan. and it's a book that really is around data. But it's around, as educators, we make decisions based on data, based on information.
Yeah.
But it's a shift from sort of standardized data to human data. So it's humanizing data.
Oh, wow. So
about being able to use voice, student voice, parent voice, staff voice to inform, to make those decisions. So, it's a great read.
Yeah, well, add it to my list, definitely. What is one part of your daily routine that you cannot skip?
Here's my guilty pleasure will absolutely be my morning coffee with no one around.
No one around. It's the best type of coffee.
It is
peaceful.
It is the best type of coffee. But I'll add part B to it. So I'll get up early, have the coffee myself. But the part B to it, absolutely. And summer's been my wife teaches.
Yeah.
And as well as being able to have the two of us just a coffee and play catch up, or either I'm up to work or she's. So there's a part A and a part B to it. But individual coffee. Nothing better to write.
How do you like your coffee?
I'll take a milk in it, and that's
something simple like that.
Something simple.
Wow, very cool. And outside of work, what do you love to do? What's your one thing that you want to look forward to doing every day?
Yeah, one of the things that we so I've got three boys. Three men, and
chaos,
and they are golf fanatics.
Oh, really? That's an expensive hobby.
Well, two of them, one's in university, the other's in high school, but they were working at a golf course. So, that's luckily that sort of saved a couple of bucks. But they're trying to pull me into golf. And I'll tell you, because there's my joy as well in terms of being able to golf with them when they bring dad along and I'm not dragging them down. So there's my, as I move forward in life, I will be a golfer.
Is your wife also getting into golf?
She has no interest in golf. So the beauty of it, three boys, myself, there's a foursome. Yeah, and so I'll beat them yet.
Eventually, you will. All right. And what is one piece of technology or tool, could be a software or hardware, that you think is indispensable in today's world of education?
So we talked in terms of the pandemic again. Always just comes off part of our vernacular too much, probably. Just in terms of collaboration. So I think in terms of sort of the notion of any Google Doc, MS Teams, just any interaction, anything allowing for that collaboration, I think is a necessity. We can't do what we do without it. It's a bit of forced collaboration that takes place as well. So I think collaborative tools by way of technology is a non-starter in terms of what's needed.
I think the pandemic forced people to use it.
Agreed.
Get comfortable with it, and now we're in a world where it's part of our life, whether we're in person or online.
100%.
We're using the same tools that we learned to use at a time where we had to use them. So it's definitely a big piece of it there. And what is one skill that you think every future educator needs to have? Whether it's maybe we can do one hard skill and one human skill, a soft skill.
I think sort of the soft skill. There's the notion of active listening. Just listening, right? It's easy to hear, but am I taking that in, right? Sort of a bit of a theme from what we were talking about today. But sort of the notion of active listening, I think, is a critical piece. And then the other part is just critical thinking skills, right? Being able to think in terms of what sort of the noise that's around us, different media, news outlets, and how do we sort of work through? How do our kids, how do our students work through to find out what is fact? Right, so the notion of sort of going through all the information critically to land on where you need to land on. So critical thinking skills would be.
Do you think it's becoming harder for our generation to have that because they're so influenced by social media and what's around them that sometimes I start to question what's real and what's not, and what's true and what's not. But when I look at a lot of kids, our future generation, they seem to go. Turn their switch very quickly to say, okay, that's it. That's the fact. That's what I've seen. That's how it should be. Do you think it's becoming harder to administer that?
I do. I do for that reason as well. But then I catch myself and I think of, when I was visiting schools, visiting classrooms, and speaking with students. And then you catch yourself as well. So I catch myself as well going, you know what? I think our kids are at a good place.
Yeah.
as well, which is continue to do what we do. I think its accessing of information is much more readily available. So it's continuing to teach how to, sort of as a sieve, sort of go through it to land where it needs to land.
Scan through everything that needs to be there.
Yeah, we're a culture of immediacy. Right?
Yeah,
we want things now.
We want quick. We're used to convenience.
We are as adults as well. But then it's the importance of slowing down where we can. So that's teaching, right?
Yeah.
That's why we have an education system. That's why we teach.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we also have a lot of younger listeners, whether they are going into education or they're pursuing a different career, like your kids are, some of them are working at banks, some at other places. What advice would you have someone that's early on in their career? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would tell them not to rush through in terms of that career choice.
Okay.
Right? There's a long career ahead, and sometimes it's easy to jump into I need this particular job right from now. I think part of it is getting to experience, whether it's through co-ops, whether it's through networking, from even through in terms of high school. I think you and I on another occasion had a conversation about SHISM programs and so forth.
Right.
Those programs, co-op programs, programs in university just allow for a little more of a sampling.
Yeah, 100%.
Of what do I want to be able to do as well, because the runway at that age is this.
And I think
for me, it's this.
People
so
don't realize that, right? I think as kids, you're like, oh, this person is so ahead of me, and they already have everything figured out. And
100%.
It's sometimes we have to really take a step back and experience things.
I agree, and I think that's where I think in the education system we're so, by way of advice, where there is opportunity or look for opportunities to sort of have those samples of work job experience. I think that'd be a takeaway I'd want all folks to walk with.
Yeah, and that's why, when I went to the schools and I did a lot of workshops on these topics, and I thought to myself, well, the kids are in the classroom, so they're very comfortable. I'm like, I need to get them out of the classroom. Yeah. So we partnered with Dell, we partnered with RBC, and we say, let's get them to the offices. Right. Let's take them there for them to experience what it's like to live those roles.
It's a different experience.
And they're more serious. Yeah. They pay more attention because they know that it's not their classroom environment, so they can't play around as much as they do. So it forces them to be in that space.
I love that.
And last question for you today, Steve. What's next for you, the board? If we look 5-10 years from now, where do we see ourselves?
5 years. So for me will be short. I love what I do. I love the role I have now. I love the roles that I've had before. So I will continue to do this until that love is no longer there.
Education is where you're meant to be.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And by way of board, we're a large board, third largest in the province. Yeah. We will continue to have growth. We'll continue to have growth from folks from people all around the world, and that's our strength as well. Just that diversity of thought, diversity of community, families, staff.
Yeah.
So that part will absolutely continue, and I think 5 years. Innovation will continue to ring through in terms of how we do things.
Yeah.
As well, but I think being able to keep up with what's out there and moving forward, as opposed to sort of continuing to do what we do because we've always done it, right? And I think that's the notion of a progressive board, and sort of the keeping up and being able to listen to industry, right? Being able to listen to other sectors outside of education to inform.
Maybe they teach us something.
The work that we do. Yeah, right. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your time.
Right. Very nice to meet you, and it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you and having this conversation.
Yeah, thanks to our listeners.
Thank you.